Welcome to this 25th anniversary celebration of the Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone Dry oral history project, also known as the Women of the Dust Bowl collection. This event is sponsored by the OSU Libraries and the Center for Oklahoma Studies, and it's a momentous occasion for a number of reasons. First, the work on the collection itself was and has been a massive undertaking, both in the recording and in the processing, and I expect you'll hear more about that in a few minutes as we talk about the genesis of the collection. Secondly, though, this was the first oral history project that was undertaken by the OSU Libraries, and as such, it ended up being a pilot project of sorts for the founding of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program, which would be created a few years after the completion of this project. Neither this project nor the development of the OOHRP would have been possible without the proactive backing and support of Dean Sheila Johnson. So she's a key figure in the story we're going to be discussing today. Another key figure was the late Dr. Jennifer Paustenbaugh, who was an associate dean here at the OSU Libraries before later becoming the university librarian at Brigham Young University. She initiated this project. She had been researching the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma and discovered that the majority of documentation on the culture and history of that time period was largely being portrayed through a male lens. Very little was recorded at the time about the lives of women during the Dust Bowl, and she wanted to address that. The interviews generated for this collection certainly helped remedy that issue, as almost 150 women were recorded for this project. The oral histories were conducted in the Oklahoma Panhandle by Jennifer, along with Shelly Lemons and Steve Kite, who we are very happy to have with us today. They're part of the original crew, and they were both graduate students in the history department at the time. And the three of them, Jennifer, Shelly, and Steve, in different combinations, were responsible for recording this series of both individual and group interviews with women who had lived through the Dust Bowl. As anyone who has done oral histories knows, the recording of an interview is just the first step. On average, within an oral history project, each hour of interview done takes an additional 32 hours of processing. So there's a lot that happens on the back end. For this project, that work included transcriptions of all of the interviews back when humans actually did that sort of thing, checking and editing the transcripts to make sure there were no errors and making them available for research while also preserving them for posterity. That work took a number of years, and some of it has just been recompleted rather recently by Patrick DeGlaris here on this panel, who generated newer, higher quality digital preservation copies for our archives, and he'll be touching on that in a bit too. Anyway, that's a quick overview of the project that we're here to celebrate today. You'll hear more about all of that as we talk about our experiences with the project and what its impact and legacy have been on teaching and research. We're planning on having the roundtable discussion with time for some audience questions as well. And we'll wrap that up by about 4 or so that everyone can enjoy the reception and talk to some of our speakers. I want to briefly introduce all of our panelists to you. Starting from the left down there, Dr. Stephen Kite is a professor of history, social sciences, and philosophy at the University of Arkansas, Fort Smith. He received his MA in history from Emporia State and his PhD from OSU, and much of his research is centered on the areas of public history, the Gilded Age, and the Dust Bowl. Dr. Shelly Lemons is a professor of history at McKendree University in Illinois. She earned a Master of Arts in History from Missouri State and her doctorate from OSU, and her teaching and scholarship have primarily focused on women and gender issues, including her work with Oklahoma women in the Dust Bowl. Dr. Tom Jorsch is next. He's with the History Department here at OSU with a Master of Arts and Library and Information Science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and his doctorate in history, again, from here at OSU. His research interests run from American socialism and industrial and agricultural protest movements to the Gilded Age, the Progressive Era, and World War I. Patrick DeGlaris, to my right, your left, is an associate professor and the assistant department head and archivist of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. He holds a history degree from the University of Florida, as well as a Master of Library Science from Florida State. Patrick's research and outreach have been based on ensuring discoverability with audiovisual materials, but with an outward-facing emphasis on community engagement and doing that work ethically and collaboratively. And I'm Dr. Mary Larson. I'm the Associate Dean for Distinctive Collections here at the OSU Libraries. While my research interests have evolved somewhat over the years, the centering features for me have always been the representation of rural women in the cultural and historical record, and I've also looked a lot at the evolving conversation of ethics and oral history. So just briefly, to give you a sense of what we've got planned today, we're going to start out by discussing the origins of the project in its early days. Then we'll talk a bit about the processing and preservation. And finally, we'll get into a conversation about the use of the collection in teaching and research and its legacy. But before we launch into that, we're each going to take 5 minutes to do a very brief introduction to how we've intersected with the collection over the course of our careers. And after that, I'm going to be mediating the discussion, and we'll try to give everyone equal opportunities to be part of the discussion, and then we'll open up for Q&A from the audience. So we will start out with Steve.
Yep. Hello. As Mary said, I'm Stephen Kite. I got my PhD in history here from Oklahoma State University. And it was during that process of getting my PhD that the history department informed me they had already given me too much money and they were cutting off my funding. I was out on my own. So I wandered over to special collections department here in the library to ask for a job. And the head of the department at that time, Heather Lloyd, was nice enough to say, yeah, that she'd hire me part-time to work. So I went to work for the special collections department in the late last years of the 90s. The next year or so, we found out that monies were available for studies, research projects, programs that involved or enlarged the history of Oklahoma women. The people that could come up with or propose projects could get it funded by the state for quite a bit of money. And so Jennifer Paustenbaugh, who was then head of special collections, asked, we were kind of trying to brainstorm what projects could we do that involved Oklahoma women that, could get us that funding and we could take that on. And so I was started to think about, the history of women in Oklahoma and everywhere else, and thinking about oral histories and what audience of women are we starting to lose, or, are starting to age out of existence. That means die, right? So which category, demographic are we starting to lose? And so we kind of went back in time and said, okay, here's their age range of people that are starting to kind of lose their memory, lose their hold on what happened. And, what happened in their life that would be interesting to talk about in Oklahoma. And of course, the Dust Bowl was one of the ideas that popped up. So we immediately started moving forward with starting this project on Oklahoma women that lived through the Dust Bowl, that did not move, right? That stayed here. That was the focus. So just, one, the availability of money, two, the fact that we were losing that audience in rapid numbers, drove the beginning of that project. And so we started from there. So that's kind of how I remember the beginning of this project.
Well, then I'm going to just dive in, because that's how I got involved. After Jennifer Paustenbaugh and Steve had come up with sort of a basic idea of what they were wanting to do, they put out an ad, a campus job posting, for someone who might want to come and work with the development of the Women's Archives and also work in oral history. So I applied for that. I remember I interviewed with Jennifer and Steve in the Angie DeBow room in Special Collections, and I had done a little tiny work in oral history before, probably exaggerated a little bit in applying for said position, but we really clicked together. This is something that we could really do this. We could figure this out, and we could explore Oklahoma women and this experience through oral history collection. So that was I started here as a grad student in 1997. So in the fall of 2000 is when I took that position in special collections, coming in as a women's historian, coming in as somebody ready to learn a lot about public history and oral history, because I hadn't done a lot of that professionally. In 2001, we took January 2001, took our first trip in the field to do interviews in Cimarron County, just go big or go home, right? All the way out into Boise City. And that was really one of the first times I had ever been west of I-35 in my life. And so in my late 20s, I was exploring all sorts of new things. So we did the interviews for several months. In the fall of 2001, I took a job and moved to Utah, and thought, well, that was a great experience, and I'm kind of sad that it's over. But then it kind of, this project, I kept intersecting with it again. And I was sort of, well, so like I was in Utah for 3 years and then got a job in St. Louis, and I said, oh, time to get on that publication track. And gave a call to this one and said, hey, do you want to write an article together about our Dust Bowl project? I need a publication for my new gig. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we did that. So we wrote a piece together. And then, I sort of always kind of kept coming back to the stories. I teach with the collection in my women's history class, and now I teach environmental history as well. So never really stopped thinking about it, the stories and the experiences of what we did in making this thing, and then the content that's in the thing. And then 2004, I changed and took a different job at a different institution where I am now at McKendree University, and on the tenure track, and need a publication. And I said, Steve, you want to write an article? And so we started to work up something else, and then ended up back in Cimarron County and Boise City in the summer of 19, and discovered something I'll talk about later in our event today, some HDC reports, Home Demonstration Club reports, sort of, and then kind of like kept those things going some more. So now I've got oral histories, and I've got HDC reports, and now I'm a full professor, and now I'm on sabbatical. I'm like, want to write a book? So now that's the project we're working on now. So it's the gift that keeps on giving, my experience with the Dust Bowl collection.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say too that when we came up with the idea of doing oral history, women and living through the Dust Bowl, neither Jennifer, myself, nor Shelly, nor had any experience with doing oral history. I mean, we'll get that as we go, right? Okay. But so we kind of entered this cold. I mean, without a lot of experience.
But like what you were saying, it was such an important population to try to capture. If you waited until you had all of the parts, you were going to miss the opportunity.
Right. We had to jump on it.
Yeah.
I'm Tom Jorsch, and I had nothing to do with the creation of this project. I actually worked in special collections at the time when they were doing this, and I had no interest whatsoever in what they were doing. The way I got into even being interested in the Dust Bowl was at a previous job. I had a team teach a course, and an English professor approached me about teaching Grapes of Wrath and the Dust Bowl, and I said, I guess that's my best option here. And ever since then, I just kind of got hooked into it. And when I came to OSU, since I put a lot of time into that course, I pitched a course here, and I teach a course called Dust Bowl. That's part of the history. It's cross-listed in the history department and the American Studies program. I teach it every fall. If you're an undergrad and want to take that course, it's available this coming fall. And so I teach that course, and I use their interviews that they did as part of the course. So I'm going to talk about teaching using these documents, and I'm going to just give you a smattering of what some of the students have said about it. At the end of that course, I asked students, tell me what you like most about the course. Don't tell me what you didn't like most. You'll tell me that soon enough too, I'm sure. But I wanted to see what they were responding to. And there's a lot of interesting things, I would argue, that we do in that class that they could pick from. We listen to a lot of Woody Guthrie music. They have a chance to go to the Woody Guthrie Center. We go to the OSU Art Museum, which, if you're among the faculty here, students actually liked going to the art museum and interacting with that art. We read Grapes of Wrath, and as much as they think they're going to hate reading a 350-page novel, they actually end up liking it. We watch the film Grapes of Wrath, and we look at Dorothea Lange photography. So there's a lot of different things. The Ken Burns documentary you look at as well. Despite all those things they can pick from, many of the students say the the thing they liked most about the course was reading the transcripts of the women who lived out in the Panhandle during the Dust Bowl. So I'm going to give you a couple of comments that students wrote about this. So one student says, "Some of my favorite parts of the class were reading about the resilience of Okies and especially the women of the time. A second massive takeaway for me, which fueled my course paper, was how the Dust Bowl and Depression allowed for women to truly put some of the progress from the 1920s into action. New roles and responsibilities became available due to the stresses faced. Even traditional women could exhibit some kind of progress, even if only out of necessity." Second student said, "My favorite part of the whole course was people telling their own personal stories from the Dust Bowl. I got the most out of these because I could picture what it was like. I could hear the sadness in their voice, which told me how hard it was." A third student said, "It was very neat to hear the firsthand accounts from survivors of the Dust Bowl. The interviews were fascinating when the people would use examples of how they adapted to everyday life with the dust and the dirt." And then the last student said, "My favorite thing about the Dust Bowl course is learning about the personal experiences people encountered. I never knew what people had to live through. Hearing and reading about people having to cover up doors and windows with wet sheets, having never-ending dirt in their house, having to rinse out dishes before use, constantly breathing in the dirt, and being surrounded by total darkness truly brought insight into how it was to live during the Dust Bowl." So I share those to say, the important part, I think, about their contribution to make sure this history still existed is that students or anybody that's reading this material can connect more as a human being to the past. I think we fall into a trap when we're teaching history courses that we talk about, well, this many people migrated, this many people lost their homes, this many people did this, that, and the other thing. And you kind of lose the connection that these were real people living real lives. And I think the oral history testimonies do a better job than just about anything at getting at just the humanness of the whole thing. And it isn't just the disaster as well. If you read the transcripts and if you listen to them, you find out that they're not just surviving dust storms all the time. They're getting married, they're having fun, they're raising children, they're joking around. And I'm sure you guys can tell stories that when you'd have a collection of people together talking about their experiences, they have just a good time talking about it. And that adds another layer of complexity. It's not just all tragedy. There's other things going on as well. And one other quick story, probably not so quick, I'm an academic, nothing goes quick, is another interaction I had with a student using this collection. Last spring, a graduate student from Germany came to Stillwater to use this collection and was doing basically a master's thesis on why people stayed in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl and why did some go to California, what's pushing people one way or another. And so he does all this research. He used their collection a lot to do the research. And then there's oral histories of people who got to California as well. And we had a long conversation about how good are these sources? Because as I'm sure we'll talk about too, you're having like 80-year-old people reflecting on their childhood. So what are they remembering accurately? What are they just making up? What are, if their parents are shielding them as children, how does that affect how they think about things? When they're adults in the 50s and they go through kind of a mini Dust Bowl, how does that affect how they think about the Dust Bowl from the 30s? So how true are these stories? And the student from Germany was very concerned about whether this information was valid or not. And so, we talked about that and, I assured him, well, you just have to kind of, parse your language a little bit with that. And so when he finished the paper, it was really good. It was honestly better than most of the graduate work that's produced at OSU. And that's not a slight to the program here. It's a different system that they have in Germany. He was a really good student. When he got back to Germany, his professor read it and was not terribly impressed, apparently. He was much more social scientific and said, you can't use any of this oral history. We don't know if this is true or not. And so we had a long discussion again about that. I have no idea what happened with that, if he passed his thesis or not. But it kind of brings up this question we deal with a lot in academia, but how do we know what we know? What do we do when we're not sure about something? How do we corroborate sources? How do we use this information? I'm not going to solve that riddle for you right here. All I want to point out is what I think is important and needed to be in that German students' thesis, as well as how undergraduates here interact with the material, is to say you have to come to terms with the human aspects of what are happening in the Dust Bowl. And this is just one tool, these interviews that you can use to get at those things. And so it's not even a question of whether the humanist approach or the social scientific approach is a better way. I think they have to be used in tandem, because even the statistical evidence can be tricky to use for sure in some cases. But without the information that they created essentially by doing the interviews, we wouldn't have a sense of these personal lives. And so it's an important source to use, but they have to be used carefully for sure.
Oh, that was great. My name is Patrick DeGlarish. Just as a refresher, I'm coming at this from a different approach. So I'm with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I came in 2018 as the archivist for the program. And so my relationship was mainly as a custodian, you could say, of the collection. So I got here and the baton essentially got passed to me of, it is now your responsibility to care for this material. As much as it was a collection that was created in 2000, 2001, it's something that continues to this day. It's not just this thing that exists digital, everyone can access it. It exists on cassette tapes and paper and digital files and all of those things that are required to make sure it persists into the future. And so I had the great benefit of coming here 10 years after it was transcribed and digitized for the first time. So I didn't have to directly be responsible for it, or so I thought. And so my job really is, as reference requests came in, how can we use this, whether it's students, whether it's producers of media companies, whatever it may be. I'm the person there for the most part, helping ensure that it is broadly available. So not just responding to these requests, but going out in classrooms, making sure it's online and as broadly available as it can be. And so one of the things I really liked about what Tom just set up is the idea, these aren't only materials, these are also relationships that are fostered with these people. And so part of being the archivist, that custodian of the materials, our program also has the responsibility to maintain those stories and those voices and that relationship to the community, because they have that relationship to these materials. Even as those people pass away, those communities, those towns, those families still have a sense of ownership or identity inside these materials. And so, there's people interviewed in 2001 that were interviewed 15, 20 years later almost. And we lost someone just last year, Pauline Hodges, who continued to be a collaborator for our program and other partners. And so for us, as much as it is the collection and the material, it is that human connection. These are real life stories, and we have to honor those and the impacts they have on that local level, apart from how other people might use them. Besides that, I mentioned that they were physical tapes. And so 2001, as advanced as we like to think that is, it was still cassette tape. So we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have all these fancy digital recorders. And so someone had to sit there and digitize it, play it on a cassette deck into a digital recorder or computer of some type to pick up that signal. And so then someone had to listen to that. And there were 5 or 6 people in an interview and figure out who was talking. And so I'm very grateful to not be part of that process, like I said. But as the years went on, so part of being that custodian is archivists are always playing detective and looking at a collection, whether it's 20 years or 50 years, 100 years, and figuring out why did they do what they did? What was the process in which it was created and digitized and preserved? So part of that responsibility as we're getting it online and making sure we have it available is going through the paperwork. Do we have release forms for everyone? Some are missing. What does this mean? Do we have permission for this to be public? Also for certain recordings, seeing there are pieces missing. Was that part of the interview? Was that just small talk? Who made that determination of what was interview, what wasn't? And so all of those things go into this, like what are we making available? Oral history isn't just the thing that was recorded and then it's there. All of these different people have a role and help interpret it in different ways before it sees a public audience. And so part of me interacting with it as I got here was figuring out who were all the people involved, what were the decisions made, and how, if there were those creative or interpretive decisions, how can we be transparent about the way it's represented today? So all of that led to eventually this past year working with an intern to redigitize those interviews, because 20 years later, the technology is better, the tools, the standards, all of these things are better today. And we can apply some of that, I don't know what the word to use. We can be more have more forethought in the ways that we're describing, okay, who digitized it, what side of the tape was this, what side was blank, all of those things, so that when I pass the baton inevitably to someone else, that material is still there and some of those answers are provided. So there's a whole lot more I can say, but I will let us get into the Q&A.
Okay.
So I was hired at OSU in 2009 to serve as the director of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program, or the OOHRP, which was just a couple years old at the time. I'd previously worked in Alaska and Nevada, but like I said, one of the themes that's always going through my research has been the representation of rural women in the record. So when I got here and saw the Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone Dry project, I was really excited. Now, I have two different relationships to the material. First, as a caretaker, when I came in, first as a caretaker and also as a researcher, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I arrived in the program at about the same time that the existing oral history crew was getting the collection ready to put online. And I want to acknowledge all the folks that were involved. Dr. Juliana Nicolasian was digitizing the original recordings, which had been conducted with cassette recorders, which was standard at the time. Dr. Tanya Fincham and Latasha Wilson were working on other aspects of the processing, including readying bios for interviews, searching for photographs, reformatting transcripts to be put online. There were a lot of other things going on. A few months later, a huge commemoration not tied to our project was held in Boise City to mark the 75th anniversary of Black Sunday. And Latasha, Jennifer, and I went out to the Panhandle to document that. At about the same time, Ken Burns's crew had been through here. They were utilizing some of the oral histories in our collection to try to identify which people they might want to work with for his Dust Bowl documentary, which came out in 2012. And also, starting back in 2011, we were asked to partner with the American Library Association and the Mount Holyoke Library on a Dust Bowl exhibit, which ultimately took the name of our oral history project. The whole traveling exhibit is called Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone Dry. And while that was completed in 2012, it is still touring today. It was just somewhere not too long ago, somewhere in the neighborhood within a half-hour drive. Not all that long ago. Anyway, the collection was definitely having a moment in those years. And we were receiving, once it got online, we were receiving a lot of feedback from people who were using it. And I think our favorite somewhat random out of the blue thank you note was from a mom in Massachusetts, which was a little surprising, but her daughter had found the collection online and used some of the interviews for a 7th grade history paper. And that to us was kind of what it was all about, letting curious people find this stuff and use it and be interested in it. And I'll spend just a couple minutes quickly talking about what I've done on my own research, but I've been able to look at really granular topics using this collection, such as how women contributed to family farms and keeping those afloat during the Dust Bowl, specifically through things like the sale of eggs and cream and milk, or the symbolic use of food during times of scarcity to define insider and outsider groups. But you also have broader subjects like the importance of home and relationships to women during the Dust Bowl, or, and this kind of reflects what Tom was talking about, changing emotional states in retelling their experiences and looking at journals and letters that were written during the Dust Bowl by some women versus the oral histories that were done after the end of the Dust Bowl, and kind of doing sentiment analysis with that to see how their approaches might be different. It's very different if you're in the middle of something than if you've gotten to the other side of it and know there's an end. So I've been able to do both of those things. And I think, having that close read and then a distant read says a lot about the versatility of this collection and all of the material that's in there, because I've been able to do everything from documenting how women or their mothers, kept the family farm afloat, paid the taxes on the farm every year during the Dust Bowl, and also paid for most of the groceries at a time when the farms weren't producing crops but were actually bleeding money instead of contributing it. So I think I'll stop with that. But I think it's just a wealth of material. It's a great gift to have access to it and to have been able to work with it. So thanks to you folks for doing all of that work back then. So I wanted to start out with a few questions. I think we'll start with Shelly and Steve. You've talked a little bit about how you became involved with the project and what your roles were. Could you discuss, though, a little bit about how you identified people to interview? I mean, did you feel like you were able to get a pretty good mix of women? Or were there a lot of challenges with that? Or what were some of the original challenges with the project?
All right, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So we had a huge challenge in identifying who women that we would talk to, who could we talk with about this, right? I mean, how do we go about finding our target audience, and we didn't know really. And so, you kind of, people at first started to say, oh, I know a lady that I think she lives with the Dust Bowl. And we go, okay, so we go talk to them or whatever. How are we supposed to find all these people? It was a great idea, but now how do we do it? So we thought, old people.
Where old people
Where do
live?
old people live? Nursing homes, right? So we started calling nursing homes, saying, "Hey, we're from OSU. We're doing this project. No thanks, we don't want anybody." It was like a constant reject. And good for them because they're protecting the residents. We were trying to find. So we had kind of rejection after rejection after rejection in locating any sizable numbers of women to interview. Until we happened on
we say, who is interested in this stuff? People like us.
Right.
Where are people like us? Historical societies, community centers, museums. And then we started to make connections in that crowd, and that changed everything.
Yeah, so we started to call up area museums, historical societies, people that were knowing the history, and they knew the people to get in touch with. So
the person you need to talk to is.
Yeah. So what we would call it, the queen bee?
The queen bees,
Why don't you do that?
Well, I'm going to back up for a second before I do a queen bee story. So we started to make building relationships and it being sort of like a community cause, right? So we're not from these towns that we're going to. So we are making these relationships, building these relationships with the people who are running these centers. And those people became indispensable in making this project work. At the Cimarron Heritage Center in Boise City, Oklahoma, Judy and Phyllis Randolph, who was there when we started. Jody is there now. What's Jody's last name? I can't remember.
I don't know.
I do know, but I can't remember. Anyway, they trusted us to come into their community and do this work. And they were trusting that we were going to do our best, even if we didn't know what we were doing, we're going to do our best to be able to work with the people that they connected us to. And so there was one incident where that kind of went south a little bit, that we were calling people to arrange to go out. We would drive out to do these interviews. We do them in block sets because, well, you have to tell the story of the very first trip and why we decided if 5 people wanted to talk at the same time, that's what we were going to do. We were driving out there, got pulled over on the side of the road.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know the story. Okay, so we're driving out.
Jody Riceley.
That's it. We're driving out and we had set up these interviews and we were going to be ready to try to collect as many stories as we could. And as we were coming into town, now you know the story?
Yeah, I thought you were talking about when you got pulled over by the highway patrol.
Okay, so that happened too, but not on this trip. The first trip out there when we had to pull over was because there was a funeral procession coming toward us.
Yeah.
And the person that had passed was somebody we were supposed to interview on that trip.
Yeah. That's how crucial our project was, that we were losing those people on a daily basis. In the hearse going that way was the lady, we were going this way to interview. We had lost that information forever. There was no accessing that hard drive.
And for both of us, that was a moment where, like, we are doing something really important. And even if we don't know what we're doing, we have to do our very best. Because if we don't do something, we're going to have more funeral processions and less oral history collections.
But you kind
I
of
got away from my story. So the Queen Bee story. So we had planned a trip that we were going to go out to do interviews. And so now we have decided we're going, if you won't talk to us by yourself, well, bring your friend. Oh, that sounds great. Well, now we have groups of 4 and 5 women who want to talk all at the same time. And so I'm sorry, because that did get messy, but we do have field notes and special collections to try to keep track of who's doing what and when. But we had planned a trip in the winter to go out, and there was an ice storm and we couldn't go. And so then it became a calling on the phone to reschedule. And you were in special collections at the desk using the phone.
Yeah.
And you tried to call someone's house, and they didn't have an answering machine, and they didn't have their cell phone. They didn't answer the phone.
Right.
So we go down to the next one on the list and start rescheduling the interview. Well, by the time you get, 3 calls in to a set of 5, number 1 on the list knows she missed a call, and she's heard from number 2 and 3 on the list. People are talking, and she wasn't involved in that conversation, and she was not very happy with you.
Right. Yeah. So because we didn't observe the hierarchy of social order in that particular community, we got sideways with the women of that, or one particular woman of that area.
Yeah. There's a file in special collections. It's called the Idora Whalen incident, because it's Idora Whalen that doesn't like that guy at all.
I was just rescheduling interviews.
It doesn't matter.
But the point is that these museums and historical societies would say, oh, you need to talk to this one person. And they would identify kind of a leader in the community. And so we would call this one lady, and she would say, oh, yeah, I'll do that. And then we could call another lady and say, well,
your friend Tressie Hathaway's doing it.
Yeah, your friend's doing it. They go, okay, then I'll do it too. So by identifying who's kind of the queen bees in the communities, we were able to gain some trust and some traction and buy-in on that. And that's how we started to get more people coming in. And then once people found out, we don't inflict pain on you. We don't do anything bad to you. It's a nice experience. Then people started to come in of their own volition.
And then it got a lot easier, to go back to your question. Once we had done a few and had now a reputation and a relationship in the community, people would come and would talk to us.
Yeah. This brings up the idea of favorite stories, because I think everybody who's worked with this collection in one way or another has favorite stories. And to try to spread the wealth around a little, we'll start with Tom and Patrick, because maybe it's something that students respond to best, but start with you and then circle back to Shelly and Steve on this.
There's a lot of good ones, but I'll share one experience that could have been a bad experience, but it ended up being a very good experience. I was surprised at going through some of the interviews how some of the women commented on Roma people, right? It rhymes with tipsy, starts with the G. It's a racial slur. Don't use the word, but they use the words in the interviews, and so it got brought up a lot. These people are coming to town, and they were worried about that, and so I brought it up in class because we had looked at one of these interviews, and there was a student in the class who was having none of that, using that particular word to talk about it, because I did use the word in class. And so it became a teaching moment, right? Of saying, okay, well, why shouldn't we use this particular word? And then tried to bring it back to the history about what is it that these women were responding to? What was the issue? And so it became a really good classroom experience in the long run. But it wasn't something I was really prepared to talk about at the time. But the bigger point, I suppose, is there's all kinds of little nuggets in here, right? It's not just about sweeping off all the dishes and that kind of stuff. There's just a bunch of stuff in those interviews that, as you go through them, you go, wow, I didn't expect them to talk about that, of all things. And the students really pick up on that as well. One other thing I could tell you real quickly is my students have a lot of leeway to do research projects for the class, and so they pick all kinds of topics like farming equipment in the 1920s, the technological changes, and how religion affected people, and some stuff about politics. But because the collections are very easy to search, even if you have to bring up each interview to search through them, they can search for words like religion or church or whatever the case is, and they can find lots of great information through the interviews to put into their papers. So I get pretty good research papers as a result, and they find all kinds of stuff that I didn't remember seeing or didn't think about too much. So it's really a great resource to have.
The one I had written down is something you wouldn't be able to find in a transcript. And so anyone who does oral history or ethnographic research when you're out working with people or in a community, things go directions you don't anticipate. And so the one I'm thinking of is the interview with Orrin and Bonnie Brown when they bring out a couple fiddles and there's some spoons involved. And so half of the interview is just them, I think, convincing you, Stephen, to try to play with him. And
Yeah, we played. Yeah, we played together in their trailer.
And there's no way to transcribe that process of hearing them like, oh, we got some fiddles here, and then you hear the wife start playing the spoons, and it's like, it's this wonderful moment, because this is what it's like to do any type of oral history work, is like you go there and this is what they want to do, and you kind of have to go with it. And so, but I love that, because until you listen to it, you're like, what is going on? And it really is a great moment. And it is reflective of, I think they talk about like fiddling competitions regionally. And so it was a significant community event that does get brought up. So it is connected, but even just that experience, how it unfolds, is just, you don't anticipate it going into the interview.
Orrin he said, any fiddle player that's worth his fiddle needs to always have a rattlesnake rattle inside his fiddle. And I said, well, I don't have one in mine. And he pulled out a little bit of a rattlesnake rattle and gave it to me, and I put it in mine, and a quarter century later it's still there. And I still think of that day whenever I play, because it's still sitting in there. But yeah, you never knew that was going to happen when you woke up that day, but there you are.
I remember thinking, this interview is a disaster. This is horrible. We can't use this.
Well,
and then I was playing the spoons.
Yeah.
You want to tell your favorite story?
There's so many. Every time I go to think of, there's so many, but I'll pick one out because it's got a nice connection. So Tom mentioned his class listening to Woody Guthrie songs, and in particular, he had an album, Dust Bowl Ballads, that's full of songs about the Dust Bowl. And one of the songs is Do Re Mi, and Woody cautions people to be careful if you're thinking about leaving, right? I mean, a lot of people leave thinking they're going to get to a better place, but they don't really end up in a better place. So one of the lines he says is, don't swap your old cow for a car. You better stay right where you are. And take this little word from me. And so we were interviewing people, and guess what they were doing? They were trading their cows for cars in Boise City, Oklahoma. And I took my cow down to the Chevy dealer and got myself a car. I was like, are you serious? So out back of the Chevy dealer is a cow grazing around, and then people would take their car in and trade it for the cow, and so one, Woody Guthrie was correct. That actually was going on. Two, we talked to the people that were doing it. Dad took the cow away and came in with a car. And then three, it brought up something that we talked about ever since then was this notion of barter. You don't have money. I mean, when was the last time you saw money? It was maybe months or a year ago. So people were trading chickens for piano lessons and eggs for haircuts. And it was, in 20th century, United States of America, people were trading commodity goods for services and other items. And that was really an eye opener. So that series of events was probably one of my favorite stories. I want to tell one more.
Okay.
Where this kid was, I don't know if it was his dad or was it his uncle, that always took a big bite of chaw, like a block of chew. And was it his dad? Was it his son or anyway? So this kid gets like a big cow pie, like a big firm cow pie, and wraps it up in the dad's chew package and makes it look like it's the chew. So the next morning, the dad wakes up and goes to take a big chew of the tobacco out, and he starts screaming for this kid, and the kid like jumps out the window and runs away, and didn't come back for like a day and a half or something until the dad had cooled down. But just the idea of that guy biting into the big hunk of cow pie and getting upset with the kid. Anyway,
Oh my God.
so that's one. Those are two that stay in my mind. There's sad ones too. So I
I don't want to tell a sad one either, but I remember one of the interviews we were doing, it was sibling set. We have a handful that have sibling sets in it, and they were talking about the sod house where they had grown up. And we're like, oh, is it still there? I think you asked them, is it still there? They go, oh, yeah, it's still there. Yeah, it's covered in plaster now, but it's still there. Oh, you go down to where the house used to be on the south side of the road, but now it's on the north side of the road. And that's where you turn and you can go down there and you can go into this sod house.
Yeah.
I was thinking, we're never finding this sod house.
Yeah.
But sure.
Go to where the house used to be,
Right.
and turn right.
So if you've not been to the Panhandle of Oklahoma, you can see the curvature of the earth, right? You can see, and so we're driving along, and sure enough, there's a house on one side of the road, and there's a row of like daffodils kind of on would be like on the edge. Oh, this is the road. We drive down over the little hill. There it is, the sod house.
Yeah.
We creeped around in there.
Yep.
And poked around in their stuff. So it was cool. It was cool to be able to, as a historian, to hear a story and then be in the place where you heard it.
Yeah.
And then the other story, it's not in the content of the collection, but it's sort of like, it could be a transition for us too, I don't know. Sort of how important the collection is to people. In January 2020, before that thing happened, we were on a trip into the Panhandle of Texas to go to a few different sites we were thinking about this book project and trying to do some different things. And so we were in, is it in Sherman County? The Depot.
Yeah, the Depot Museum.
The Depot Museum, and we're talking to people. There's people coming in. We're doing some digital scanning of some diaries, and it was really a nice event. And this younger woman comes in and she sits down. She's like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're talking about, we did these oral history collections, and so now we're thinking about some other things to do with that. And she says, "Oh, my great grandmother lived in Cimarron County." So, who's your great grandmother? She says, I never got to meet her. Lorena Harriman was her name. We had interviewed Lorena Harriman, who was not really in good health. She was 100 years old, literally, when we interviewed her. But I was able to pull up the website while we were in Texas, and this woman heard her great grandmother's voice that she'd never heard before. And it was it makes me a little sad. It's such a powerful moment to know, not only am I doing something that's really exciting and interesting to me as a scholar and as an academic and as a teacher, but this is really, really something super important to people. And they can access it too. And I think, I did that. I had a part in that, and that's pretty cool.
That lady wandered into the Depot Museum having no idea that we were there and that we had recorded her great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. And just through talking to us, that happened. And so within 30 minutes of being there, she was listening to the voice of her great-grandmother that she had otherwise would never have been able to hear.
So
How that was serendipity. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll switch over a little bit to talking about teaching. I think most of us have probably used the collection in one way or another for teaching, either in the classroom or one-on-one with grad students or undergrads. Does anyone want to talk about an approach that produced particularly good results or that brought out something unexpected? And I think
I got some slides about it.
if we could, yes, and if we can start with either Tom or Patrick and then work down that way. Do you have?
I could talk about creative uses more than explicitly just teaching. So, I have a microphone. I'm waiting for you to give me the microphone. So one of the things
we
that
only had 4 lavaliers.
Yeah.
That's why I'm sorry.
So while I guess we're getting that ready, one of the things I can say is I also oversee the student podcast, Amplified Oklahoma, if you haven't listened to it. And so it's a podcast where we're an oral history program. Everyone's quick to go to the text and read the transcript, and it's helpful to find what you're looking for. But we like to center people's voices. We want you to hear in their own words what they're saying, right? We've all been emphasizing how important that is. And so it's always interesting when students are going through our collections to see the things they pull out and like what is meaningful to them. And sometimes it's personal, sometimes it makes sense in a moment. And so what I mean by that is during the pandemic, one of our interns did a podcast about masks in the Dust Bowl. And so masks were this cultural reference point that everyone was talking about and no one liked, but it was this necessity. And so being able to make those connections to Dust Bowl, in Oklahoma, they talk about the makeshift masks and the sponges and walking home and their parent putting it over their face, all of these different aspects of it. So the ways that it becomes relevant and to be able to encourage students to see what are the connections that can be made in very wild, unexpected ways. I mean, we went to the Spanish flu to see, like, that was the connection we were trying to make, but it was the Dust Bowl where we could see how did people make sense of their lives. We also had episodes on normalcy. What does it mean to just maintain a household? And so all of those things, what students bring into it, what is the cultural moment or thing that's happening, and how can you draw those connections was one that makes the podcast, I think, more interesting and meaningful for the students, but hopefully also for the audience listening to it.
I'll follow up on the theme of connections. And in my class, it's relatively early in the first 4 weeks, like the fourth week or so, that students will read through some of the oral history transcripts, and we talk about them in class in various ways. And then shortly after that, we start reading Grapes of Wrath. And one of the interesting things I notice with students a lot as we start reading Grapes of Wrath, one of the more powerful characters in that story is Ma. Right? She drives a lot of the action in the book. If you never read it, you should. I won't spoil it, don't worry. But I always have students who will start making comparisons from the oral history testimonies to the life of Ma in Grapes of Wrath. And they're usually pretty positive connections about, sort of the power of the character and the power of these women in various ways. But I get students who either in conversation in class or in their research papers, if they're writing about women, who start talking about how, when Steinbeck writes about, the author's John Steinbeck, he's a man, he's writing about a woman, that he's not quite getting it right, that there's a male voice that's kind of narrating how Ma is talking in the book, and that's different than they're getting from other sources, including the oral history. And even if I don't push them in that direction to think about that, I find a lot of the students start thinking about it. And so it's a nice way of getting sort of a comparison, right? If you're not just stuck with this fictional character, you can compare her to these actual people and what they're talking about. And so they start making connections. And I think when you're teaching this kind of material, that's the kind of stuff you like to see, right? Where they're really thinking in a way that's different than you're even necessarily trying to think about.
And I'm going to ask to go to Steve next, because then we can go to you and do the teaching and segue into the research.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't really use the collection into my classes any great depth. We always have, in my public history classes, we always have a section on oral history. And a lot of times I'll have that as a main component for an outside project to be working on. So we listen through the recordings, as examples and of things of, what to do and what not to do. Like I tell them, don't interview 5 or 6 people at one time because it's a nightmare, things like that. So we kind of use it as a teaching tool, learning tool in my classes. And then they go out and create their own oral histories, but that's mainly how I use it.
Well, I do teach with the collection, and I do it in my undergrad gen ed survey class. So I'm at McKendree University in Lebanon, Illinois. Most of those kids have never been outside of Illinois, even though St. Louis is just like 25 miles away. There's a whole river involved, and there's bridges, and so they do that. And so then whenever I'm trying to talk to them about like empathy and understanding hardship, and I use this collection to do that. And then I told them, okay, now don't be messing around because this is my work. So it's really personal. And in fact, one of the first times that I had used the collection for teaching, that's one of the comments the students had. They said, wow, this is like a love story. You just really love what you're doing with these people. How do you know these people? It's like I showed up in a black car and I said, hi, my name is Shelly. And so sort of building those relationships as you go. But okay, so here's the story. So Patty Laughlin invites us to come down in November to give a talk in Edmond at UCL. And I said, this would be a great time to have my students do the oral history listening assignment, because it's important to me that they're listening to it. So they can see the transcript, but all the questions are about the listening to it. So we do our talk, we have a great time, right? Go back to work, and I start grading their assignments. And I have a bunch of cheaters. They are word for word answering the questions the same way. They weren't even good enough to do AI cheating. This was just like straight up old school cheating. I'm like, well, that's not okay. So I need to find another interview, because I had them do a Cimarron County one. So I said, I need to find another interview that's about the same length of time and make them do it again. And I did, and they weren't very happy about that. But it was like, well, don't be a cheater, right? So this was the part 2 assignment that I gave. And so this is an interview that was done in Texas County. And it includes sisters, there's other people too, but it includes sisters Margie, Alice, and Lucille. And so I have my students do this one from a different county. And so I start grading the assignment, and they keep talking about how they're from Cimarron County. I was like, did you cheat again? What is happening? And I went and I looked a little more closely at the transcript, and it turned out that Margie, Alice, and Lucille, while they're interviewed in Texas County, they actually were from Cimarron County. So here was what? I missed this one in all the stories that I had been looking at. Well, but it gets better, right? So the book project that we are currently working on combines oral history interviews from this collection with home demonstration club reports. Now, one of the critiques of the oral history collection is that, oh, well, you interviewed these women 7 years after it happened, they're in their 80s, they were just kids, and they're old, right? So how accurate could the information be? Well, because I've been reading home demonstration club reports, I know some things about their mother and grandmother's generation. And as I was grading oral history assignments again, it turns out that Margie, Alice, and Lucille are in the HDC reports. And I track them down through first what they're saying in this is the part of the transcript. They talk about their mother. One of the chapters I've drafted for our book project is about women's fashion. It's called So What? You know, what are they making for themselves to wear? And in the oral history collection, my chicken chapter is called Chick Management. So I like to be clever. In the oral history transcript, they're talking about how their mother really loved fashion, that she was always like had the latest thing. I was like, who is their mother? Who is this? You know, the Lawson sisters, who is their mother? And I find, in fact, their mother is Mrs. Bertha Bessie Lawson. She's married to Dwight Loyal Lawson. And there she is with the red arrow with our now dear, close, and personal friend, Fern Irene Campbell Barrett, Mrs. E.J. Barrett. And it says here that they worked all morning fitting foundation patterns and gave one demonstration. It's like, well, that's pretty freaking cool. We have some overlap here between an oral history interview set and these HDC reports. Oh, but wait, there's more. The sisters talk about being involved in 4-H. So it's like, ooh, there's lots of 4-H in these reports. I wonder if they're there. Oh, yes, they are there. In the 1939 report, we see the dresser's scarf competition has Sister Margie coming in first and Sister Alice coming in second. But don't worry, Lucille is there too. She did a comforter protector and ended up getting second place in the 4-H competitions.
How much did she win?
Like 50 cents, I think, actually. Does it say on there?
35.
35,
She won.
25 cents. She won some money. You win money for this, right? Now, their mom is winning like $5 and $6 at a time whenever they win. Their mom was, in fact, in HDCs, which I already know, but now when I go back and look at the transcripts, they even said it. Our mom was in a home demonstration club. I was like, oh, missed opportunity. Had no idea at the time we did the interview. Their mother, Bessie, came here to Stillwater for Farmers Week. in 1939, she was here on campus. Pictures in the archives of the people who were here participating in that event. How'd she do? Well, she won in exhibits. You can see a first place there for where she's in it. And she serves in leadership capacity. She was the alternate county secretary for Farmers Week. And then I thought, this is a teachable moment. I'm bringing this sucker back into class, and I'm going to tell these students, like, I don't like you cheating, but look what happened. But I wonder what else I can find about this family. So I went to my favorite, Ancestry.com. You see a picture of my mom down there from my homepage, and you can see, oh, here we go, did the search for Dwight Lawson, and trying to find, I hadn't found Bessie's first name yet. She was still Mrs. Dwight Lawson when I did it the first time. And I found the family in the 1930 census and was able to look at the census page, and there they are. And there are the sisters, Alice and Margie and Lucille. And then one last time around into the oral history transcript, the sisters were telling a story. And Alice, who's the oldest, was saying, I wasn't allowed to date until I was 16. I don't know why Mom made such a big deal about that. You know, whatever. I never quite understood. She says, yeah, but Mother allowed you to date a lot younger than I did. I never understood that. Well, I think we might know. Her mom was 16 when she married their dad. So maybe you need to wait till you're at least 16 to make that happen. So I was able to take something I was doing as a teaching use of this collection. Then it sort of overlapped and intersected with what I was doing with research, and able to come back around full circle and come back into my classroom and tell my students, yeah, don't ever do that again. But here's the silver lining. And now we're all been on that journey together. And they actually talked about that in their course evaluations. So they actually kind of liked that. They were still kind of angry they had to do it twice. Like, well, consequences, maybe. So.
I kind of want to build on that for just a second, that Stillwater here, OSU, is the hub of the extension service in Oklahoma, which every county has an extension office, and that's where you have your home demonstration clubs coming out of. You have your 4-H clubs coming out of that. They create these networks of 4-H clubs and HDCs in each county, and they have competitions and contests, and they do these things. And if you win local, then you win regional or whatever, you get invited to go to Farmers Week, which is held every year in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So we go, oh, Stillwater or whatever. We think about it, maybe we don't appreciate it, but for a lot of these people, this was the trip of their life. And coming, and Stillwater wasn't as big as it is now. I mean, it's smaller. So, but I mean, coming here was like going to Paris or London or New York City, for us today. And when they talk about it, they talk about it with that excitement in their eyes. So just think about that next time you get to come to Stillwater.
I mean, like we said before, we knew we were doing something really important as we were doing it. After that first experience, going out there and doing that. But being able now as a scholar to be able to see these overlaps in different ways, it gets me excited. My excitement, I think, is contagious for my students, that they get excited about it. And people who thought they didn't care anything about Oklahoma or agriculture are now like reading about chickens, and they're doing all these things because I'm excited about sharing all of this work with them.
Okay, so we will swing back to further research if we have time, but we wanted to do a couple things first. And the first is Patrick is going to show you how to get to the website, because all of these interviews are available online. So Patrick is going to...
So hopefully if you're a student here, you've been to the library's website. No excuse if not. So the library.okstate.edu. If you go, there's no point in looking at me. I guess it's on the screen, so I don't have to assume anyone's looking at me. If you go under About the Library, this is how I'd like to go there. If you go to Oklahoma Oral History Research Program is one way. Which way should I do it? That way or digital collections? Do you care?
I don't care.
Okay, I'll do it this way. Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. To the left over here, there's a little R collections, and the website's about to be updated, so this may change in a minute. But if you click on Oral History Collections, you can see many of the ones that we have, but the one that we're looking for is Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone By. It has this nice little thumbnail, If you click it, you can learn about the project and the participants, some of the podcasts and other lectures that have been done with it. And then finally, this button here will take you to the collection, which is on the library's digital collections website. And there you can find 46 of the interviews that are currently online. So if you open one of these records up, you will see a transcript that you can open, you can download, you can go through it, search how you'd like, as well as a media file and audio recording to complement that interview. So, and down here, you can learn about individual interviews, the descriptions, keywords. This is all going to be updated with even more robust descriptive information to help make them more discoverable. So good.
Patrick. And I guess we'd like to open this up if there are any questions from the audience first, and then if there aren't, we can circle back. But yes,
I know what you mean. What do you mean by the sod house where it used to be? They moved it.
They didn't move the sod house. They moved another house that was the marker for the road to turn on.
They just moved it across the road.
They literally moved the house across the road, and that became the marker for the road to turn on to go to the sod house.
The direction, when you see where the house used to be,
Right.
turn right. And
Did you find any snakes in that sod house?
no snakes in the sod house.
That's a shame.
We found the old stove.
But it was in surprisingly good condition.
Yeah.
Really.
what about centipedes?
I didn't really look too close.
I remember a lot of people talking about putting newspapers on the walls of sod houses to keep the centipedes in the dirt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It was really dark in there. I do remember that. Yes.
How many interviews total are there? I have no idea.
I think around 50. So 49, I think 48 or 9 are online, and there's another 1 or 2 that will be up there.
Is that the number of transcripts or the number of people?
That's the number of interviews.
There are 151 people.
Because some of the interviews we did 4 or 5 people at one time.
There are 151 people in the interviews. 2 of them are men, and 149 are women. And there was something else. I just lost it.
Well, one of the men that was interviewed, we were sitting around a table. It was cold. It was a winter month. We were sitting around a table next to a heater. We had donuts and coffee, and we were all sitting around talking. A guy wanders by and goes, And he sits down to eat donuts and coffee. Now he's in the interview. Now he's a part of the collection.
That's right. You made history, my friend.
Yeah, we do also, if you're interested in Dust Bowl era interviews, we have a lot of other interviews that touch on the Dust Bowl in other collections within the OOHRP holdings. So this is the main collection, and this is the one we're talking about today and celebrating. But if you are doing research, there are multiple other collections. So you can search the entire collection, and you could look for Dust Bowl, or you could search dirt storms, because one of the things I noticed was that a lot of the women didn't talk about the Dust Bowl. They talked about the Dirt Bowl. They talked about dirt storms. They did not talk about dust storms. So if you search on either of those, you have a better chance of coming up with some of that. Anybody else? Jenny?
Does it cover it in Summer County?
For the interviews or for the Dust Bowl?
For the
Okay. Go ahead. You want to start?
Well, yeah, so we kind of had to think about, we are interviewing women that lived through the Dust Bowl. In the interim, they could have moved anywhere, right? So, I mean, we could have been in Boston, Massachusetts, interviewing a lady that lived through the Dust Bowl. So our first interview was actually here in Stillwater. And then we kind of started to just naturally move west to try to get more people. And so we interviewed people in counties from Payne County kind of on west until we eventually ended up in Cimarron County.
But we would start, we didn't think the Dust Bowl epicenter was in Stillwater. But the woman that we interviewed, Enid Pritchard, had lived in western Oklahoma So we're interviewing her, and then we go, okay, time to pack up the moving mobile studio, and we go and did interviews in Woodward. And they said, oh, it was so bad here.
Yeah.
The dust was so bad here. We're like, oh.
It was bad in Woodward. They actually had to sweep the floor. That's how bad it got. That's how dusty it got.
And we're like, what? So then we continue on our trek and move a little bit further west and a little bit further west until we found ourselves in Boise City, in Keys, in Hooker, Oklahoma, and Texas County. And this, okay, now we've got some real stories of what people are dealing with. A story that we didn't tell earlier is kind of sad, but the brother, there was a woman who had a brother who had stiff persons syndrome. And they talked about that, the brother is on a bed in the living room in their house because he's immobile. He can't move around. And so there's a dust storm coming. It's rolling. The family gathers around the brother. They make a tent out of newspaper over his face to try to help him out. And they held hands and they prayed. And their dad said, well, if this is it and this is the end of the world and we're all going to die, we're going to die together. We're not leaving your brother here. And so you're seeing more stories like that the further west we would go. And that's why so much of our work has now centered on, Panhandle in Beaver, Texas, and particularly Cimarron County.
Yeah, you go from a lady who said, oh, we had to sweep out the floor that day to a family who's saying, we're dying.
Mm-hmm.
Today's the day we die. It's a pretty big difference in between Woodward and Boise City.
But to answer your question, so we have gone in different parts of the state. So it's actually kind of interesting, and whenever you pull up the collection to see, you can see the counties where they're recorded, not necessarily where people grew up, as I learned from my mistake. But you can see the counties that are covered in the collection right from the initial page to search.
Is that on this page here?
Is it? I think, yeah. Interview county is down that second box on the far side.
Yeah, if you look on the left, the faceted search options, there's interview county, interview location. So you can see it by town and by county. So, and these would be where they took place. We have more metadata that will be updated that will reflect the coverage of the places they talk about, which will balance out. The interview can be in Cimarron County or somewhere else, but be talking about this. And the full text transcript, if they talk about a place, it would show up if you're searching too.
Well, and on the landing page, nested on the landing page is a list of all of the locations.
And the participants?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least for now.
Yep.
Hello. Is there a map of the area most affected? I'm sure that one time I saw it, something on the website.
I don't think we have anything on the website, but there are plenty out there.
That's a good point, though.
Yeah.
One of the kind of, things that make Cimarron County more important in this than other counties is that if you do look at a map of where the Dust Bowl happened, basically it's from maybe the Dakotas down to Texas and then from middle of Colorado over to middle of Oklahoma, that kind of band. But there are a few counties that were in the Dust Bowl for every single second the Dust Bowl existed.
Mm-hmm.
It moved around, right? So the areas of high drought, high winds, dirt and dust might be down in Texas, it might be up in the Dakotas, it might be over in Colorado. But in all of those movements, there were some counties that were in it no matter where it moved to. And Cimarron County was one of those. It never really got any respite. It was always there. So Cimarron County, county in southeast Colorado, county in southwest Kansas were the epicenter. It was the anchor as the Dust Bowl moved all around it. So, they had stories to tell. They had experiences. So that's, yeah.
Rebecca, did you have a...
Yeah. I was just wondering about, you said you talked to people you stayed here, so where is going California. So what were some of the reasons that they gave?
Some of them stayed because they didn't have any money to go anywhere else. Really, if I had tires and $50, I'd be out of here. Other times I can remember there is an interview story with Odalie Bond, and she was talking about people asking her dad, why are you staying here? And she said that her dad said, look at this land, look at this. All of this land belongs to me. This is mine. And she said, she ends that story with saying, and Dad told that man, if it got really bad, we could eat snake. And so they were committed that this was where they were rooted. That was their home.
It was the only thing a lot of them owned.
Then you was talking earlier a little bit about fashion, and my grandma used to tell stories of making her mother, and especially making clothes out of flour.
Yeah.
Did they talk about in that or the scarcity of fabric?
They do. They talk about flour sacks and feed sacks. And now with other work that I'm doing and looking at the home demonstration agent, it's surprising how little there is of discussion of that in the Home Demonstration Club reports. And I hypothesize that that's because it was such a given that that was what you were going to be using. If you weren't, upcycling from something you already had, that it was going to be material that came from a chicken feed sack or a flour sack or a sugar sack. And now I have to also admit my sort of ignorance about it. When I was first starting this project and I was thinking about like a flour sack, I was like, wow, they must have had to have a lot of those. Flour sacks aren't very big, right? And then I was at the Truman Library and they had a display and they had the 100-pound flour sack. Like, oh, this is a significant piece of fabric. This makes a lot more sense now.
You need about
And I
five,
think-
would be 5? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
about 5.
I was going to say one of the interviews goes into detail about how many flour sacks you need for a dress, for a shirt, for underwear, for different pieces of clothing.
And these women being who they are, and then sort of getting into sort of like my women gender studies mindset, they will say things like, oh, we felt so sorry for the guy that was working at the feed store because, mother wanted to have the 5 sacks that matched. And of course, they're not all together. So he's having to move all these 100-pound sacks around to get the 5 she wants so that she can make the things that she wants to make at home.
Also, in those flour sacks, they had the name of the company, A&W Flour, stamped on the sack in red or blue or black ink, whatever. Well, when you wash the flour sacks, that is supposed to wash out so that all you're left with is the pattern that's on the. Sometimes it didn't always wash out, and people would go out with A&W Flour in front of the in various places.
You mentioned like a lot of people this day, it goes. Part of it was like they owed that land. Did you interview any families where they didn't own the land? They were tenant farmers.
Most of the population in Cimarron County, where we have focused so much of our attention, they were not tenant farmers.
Yeah, I wish, and this is one of those things. Kind of thinking back, if I would have known what I know now, that would have been a question. But one, these were people that were 9 to 15 years old. Would they really know the status of the land? I don't know if they would remember that, but yeah, I wish that's a great question. And we were earlier before we got started, we were thinking we wish we would have asked these ladies their maiden name. What was your name before you got married? Because that would help us out so much in our research. But tenant farmer, that would be another great question.
Are there many of them aren't 50 that are still alive, or we lost that whole generation?
Oh gosh, yeah, most all there may be 1 or 2 that are still around, because there were some. There was a woman that I interviewed here in town who had grown up in the Panhandle, who was significantly younger than most of the women that we had interviewed. I don't remember her name. I would have to look.
Some of them were very long lived.
Yes.
Because Pauline. Yeah, but we were. I was looking not all that long ago, and there were still a few that we couldn't find records for. And I don't know, Patrick, if you guys have done any searches lately, but I was trying to find someone to follow up on something in one of the interviews. And
I will say I have done, when I get in my throes of research and want to take a little break, I will go on Find a Grave and see if there are new internments in Willowbar or in other cemeteries. And then when we've made trips back, we've kind of gone and paid our respects to people we interviewed who've passed since then.
The website, and I don't know if that's you, Patrick, or not, is being updated with who passes away. Is that you guys do? I mean, is that somebody's looking and putting it up there?
We update it from time to time who the we is.
Changes.
Yeah.
So there may be one or two. All right.
Vernon and Pauline was one of the last ones. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Do you guys find anyone that came back after up both for like either playing the land or just get back to home?
Now, there were some stories of people who, like, well, we didn't leave, but my cousins did, and then they did come back.
Yeah, but the focus of this interview, this oral history project, was people that stayed. So nobody left. And, they would talk sometimes disparagingly, sometimes kind of wistfully about their relatives that moved away. Like, I wish we could have, or, well, they moved out there and didn't find anything but trouble, that kind of thing. So, But Tom,
you mentioned earlier, there is a great complimentary collection that's is it out of Berkeley?
I think it's in Bakersfield.
That's right. It is in Bakersfield. A collection of Dust Bowl migrants. There's an oral history collection that's sort of like the bookend on the other side. So you wouldn't necessarily get the exact answer to your question, but you could see a little bit more of the mirrored ends of it by looking at that.
I just want to. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Was good. Like, do you have like a favorite? Isn't that like somebody interesting?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question.
The one that surprised me, I mean, it's probably not my favorite, but it's the most surprising, because I was expecting all kinds of things like, this is our land, damn it, we're not leaving for nobody. But it was the answer that Shelly already gave. Oh, if I had money for gasoline, I'd be out of here. The only reason they're not leaving is because they can't afford it, and I mean, I don't know if that's lucky for them or not, but how much of our history would be different if they would have had just $25 in their pocket to get out of here. Right. Been a lot more vacant land out there. Oh yeah. I mean, you say $10. If they would have had $10.
I think $1.25 would have gotten some of them heading west if they had that resource.
Shelly, do you either of you remember who the interviewee was? There was someone who talked about their family going out, or parts of their family, and the father saying, "Well, we can starve here just as easily as we can starve someplace else," because they'd heard reports back from the citrus groves and the work camps in California, and I'm trying to remember who that was now, and it.
Yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember who it was. Yeah, but the point being is it's not any better.
Yeah.
It's not any greener on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
Last summer, there was a Conservationist Garden Society hosted a recession in Guyana, or in their Dust Bowl, and Com Lucas was one of the instrumental in hauling into that. One of the things that read back and looked on paper to Dust Bowl, found someone to find the old recipes. And they made them and inserted them there.
Some of the things that they made.
Did they have vinegar pie?
Surprising. Maybe Johnny Case.
Okay. Any vinegar pie? No.
Our water pie.
I have a list.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
Pretty bland.
Yeah.
Well, we make the mock apple pie from Ritz Cracker.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, there's water pie.
Water pie is not very good.
But vinegar pie is not bad. It's very close to shoe fly pie.
I have heard that.
Yeah.
The problem is we had other food like this that big hair.
Well, there's that. And with that being said, we're just about at 4:00, so this might be a good time to wrap up. Thank you all, so that everybody has a chance to go over and hit the reception, but also so that everyone has a chance to talk to our guest speakers. But I want to thank everybody for being here, especially our panelists. Shelly and Stephen especially traveled, quite a ways to get here. So we do appreciate that. And Tom and Patrick, thank you so much. And thank all of you for being here to help us celebrate this 25th anniversary. This is really great. So thank you.
Yeah.